Welcome in, friends, to Fantasy Pros, the fantasy football podcast. I'm Chris Welsh, and joined with me today is the one, the only Joe Pisapia and Mr. Scott Bogman. This trio has been bringing you some fire podcasts, and today we're going to do the same thing. We're going to be talking about the 12 must-have players in your fantasy draft, 6 and 6. These two are going to battle it out. You guys let us know in the comments who has put together the best of the must-have players. Mr. Joe Pisapia, once again, control taken away from you. It's a wonderful feeling. You don't get to host it. You only get to analyze it. How does it feel?
I'm sorry. Wake me up. Wake me up when this dream is over, that you have to do all the reads and all the advertisement stuff, and I just get to sit here and talk about football with my beautiful bearded fellow here, Scott Bogman. I mean, come on. This is heaven on earth. I love this. But you know what? I love the whole must-have thing because this is such a relative fun thing. Every year, the player pool is different. Every year, the value of guys on the board is very different as well. We've seen players that used to be, first, round picks, guys like Austin Eckler. Now we're debating, do we want to take him at all at his ADP where it's so much later? It's amazing how different just a single season can change the value of some players. And I think for me, must-haves every year, it just comes back to naming the guys that in every draft I have circled, I have highlighted, I've got my cheat sheets ready from Draft Wizard, and I'm trying to make sure that they end up on my roster in some way and get as many of them as I can.
Yeah, this is an interesting concept too, the must-have players, because it can be dolled up a little bit to kind of speak to other categories. There's only so many fantasy football categories that we can talk about, but sometimes these different concepts can bring up a whole nother set of type of player. Bogman, when you hear and you listen and you conceptualize must-have players, what does that mean compared to league winners or compared to sleepers? They're probably distant relatives of all of each other, but what does like a must-have player really mean to you?
I mean, the easiest way I quantify it is if this guy goes off the board, I go, that's my really harsh analysis here.
Really good.
These are guys that I want on every single team. And I think they are league winners, if you want to call them that. They're coming. I think you need to get them at a value because sometimes these guys are ranked lower, but people like me are wanting to get them higher than their ADP, than their ECR. So they may come off the board a little bit earlier than expected, if you're playing with smart people.
Oh, there you go. Well, guess what? You can get prepared against all of those smart people, and you can be the smarty. What is that old adage where it's like, if you don't know who the fish is in the poker game, it's definitely not
Why
fish.
Why do you do this to yourself? Why do you
do it to yourself?
If you don't know who the guy is,
this is the meme where he shoots himself and he goes, "Who did this?" That's you doing cliches.
If you don't know who the fish is,
if you can't spot the donkey at the table, it's you.
If the pig doesn't smell like the pig, I'm just saying you can be the guy. You can be the smart guy at the table. You can know analogies. Listen, the mock draft simulator is not going to help you with analogies. I can promise you that, because no one has more reps in the mock draft simulator than me, and I am no better at analogies. But what it will do is make you a better drafter. You can sync up your leagues today, fantasypros.com/sync. You can get in and you can mock draft in 5 minutes. Bogman and I did an episode where we both drafted, both of us together, against the AI that Fantasy Pros has got. And we were able to put out a full-on draft, get the analysis, and I will tell you, the AI and the system is smarter than it's ever been before. You think you can game the system? No, sir, that's not going to happen. Go and do it today. The mock draft simulator. You can set up cheat sheets. You can set up strategies, maybe a zero RB, maybe a hero RB. Set them, play with them, find your sleepers, and you, my friends, can find your must-have players with the mock draft simulator over at Fantasy Pros. Download the Draft Wizard and check it out today. FantasyPros.com/mock or FantasyPros.com/sync. Either one you want to do, they all get you there. Start using the tools today. Draft smarter, not harder. There's a fish and a shark and like a pig, and then there's dogs at a poker table. And there's,
Welshisms galore. It is just unbelievable. And if you want more Welshisms, by the way, Welsh, have you told everybody about Out of Bounds with the three of us every single Monday live, that they could hear you struggle with all of these? I mean, that's something everybody's going to want to join into just for that.
Hey, if you're looking for me to struggle more, which clearly is the content that everybody wants, Mondays, go and check us out. It is the three of us. It's kind of a sports talk radio type of take. There's fantasy in it. There's pop culture. It is built around football. It's Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern on our Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. It's free. You can check it out. You can be in the audience. You can talk with us. Hands up. You can try to get me to cite some type of analogy that I'll screw up, and then it'll be on the podcast form. So you can be a part of the show. Check it out, fantasypros.com/chat for Out of Bounds, Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern. All right, gentlemen, must-have player time. Let's get into it. Mr. Joe Pisapia, we're going to start with you. Your first in the line of the must-have players for the 2024 season is whom?
Well, normally I'm somebody that doesn't mind going for the elite quarterbacks, and I still don't mind it, but this year is very specific when you're looking at some of the value of the later QBs. And Jordan Love has got to be that guy for me. And I don't want to put too much emphasis necessarily on the last 8 games, and it's dangerous to extrapolate a sample size. But the 8-game sample size, when you go back and look at it, I think is a little bit better than people even realize, despite the fact the numbers are great. There were playoff teams in there. The Detroit Lions you faced, the Kansas City Chiefs you faced, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers you faced during that stretch run. So it wasn't just beating up on the Chargers and the Carolina Panthers and the Giants and some of those lesser teams last year. He actually did it against some pretty formidable teams. Even Bogman's Steelers were in that 8-week run. That run that I'm talking about, I think what you saw was a guy emerge with the confidence. You saw him with a 70% completion percentage, averaging almost 270 yards a game, 18 touchdown passes, just 1 pick over those last 8 starts. And that's without a healthy Christian Watson and without a healthy Aaron Jones for much of that stretch too, right? So now all of a sudden, in theory, you've got Josh Jacobs there to help balance things out a little bit, even free up some more play action potential. You've got Christian Watson, you hope that's going to be healthy. And adding that sort of big-time piece makes a huge difference, I think, to what Jordan Love can even do. So I'm looking at him as a guy that could potentially finish in those top 5 quarterback point getters. And you're drafting him as, QB 10 or 11 sometimes off that board. And I'll throw a bonus one on you, too. For those playing in Superflex, Justin Fields is starting to become one of those must-have guys for me because right now it's super cheap if you're in drafts in the next couple weeks. And the upside there is another one who could finish as QB7, QB8 overall. A guy with 1,000-yard rushing potential, especially in half-point PPR Superflex formats, is beyond league-winning potential. So I reached for him in the flex draft this past weekend. I think that he could be a huge difference maker. Get yourself a third quarterback, a veteran, another boring low-level person, or even somebody like Sam Darnold who's going to probably start the season just to get you by just in case he doesn't have the ball week 1. But Fields and Love are 2 guys in single QB and in Superflex format specifically for Fields that I think those are guys that I really want to have in 2024.
Yeah, I think you're also speaking, and I'm speaking a little bit for you, when you talk about Jordan Love, you're also speaking to a more macro perspective of like later quarterbacks. You're not heavily investing. A lot of us are attempting not to heavily invest in quarterbacks. We just did a mock the other day, though, where it was the first time in a long time I had taken one of the better quarterbacks, but it was because Jalen Hurts fell to quarterback 4, and it was in round like 5. Of a single quarterback. That was an instance where I broke that mold because in general, I'm kind of with you on that macro perspective. And also, Boggs, just as a really quickly before we go to your first guy on your list, you're a big fan of Jaden Reed. I actually think Romeo Doubs is wildly underrated. And then on top of it, outside of these guys getting hurt, you've got Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, one of the top sleepers. By the way, we have awesome sleeper ranks now available in the insights that you're going to get, exclusive sleeper ranks that are designed for that. So it's like we can't pick a guy in a certain range over on FantasyPros and you'll get those warnings. But you got 4 big sleepers. Musgrave is a sleeper for me. They have got a bunch of pass catchers, which definitely makes Jordan Love really, really enticing at his ADP.
Yeah, look, Jordan Love is good. There's like meat on the bone there for him to rush a little bit more as well, to run the ball. So there is so much potential for Jordan Love in this offense. The only thing that like creeps into the back of my brain when thinking of Jordan Love and thinking about negatives is, they signed Josh Jacobs, who could be a 300 touch guy. They still have A.J. Dillon. They drafted Marshawn Lloyd. This might be a team that wants to reestablish the run a little bit more. But if they get down, and this is a high scoring division now as well. You have the Vikings that are going to pass more than anybody else. You have the Lions with all their weapons. You have the Bears adding all their weapons. It should be another really good year for Jordan Love, and he can do a little bit more than he even showed last season.
All right, let's go to Bogman. We're going to your first one. I think it is hilarious because you are the highest in the world on this player, and you're saying he's a must-have, yet you never have him in drafts. Talk about this player.
Okay, well, I don't have him in our drafts because everybody knows I want him, and they drafted him too early. We just did a mock draft yesterday, and Brock Bowers went ahead of David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, and Evan Ingram. I can't remember if he went ahead of Pitts. I don't think he did.
He did not.
In ECR, right now, he's 11. So in our draft, he went at 8. So he went higher because I've been singing his praises all offseason, and I'm a complete broken record here. I was high on Kincaid last season. I was high on Laporta last season, and Bowers is better than both of those guys. And I know people are afraid that Michael Mayer is going to be on the field a bunch and, kind of wreck Bowers' value here because he's a tight end. He's not a tight end. Brock Bowers is a weapon. And I saw this from 32 beat writers quoted Case Kiefer, who writes for the Raiders for the Las Vegas Sun, their paper. And this was his quote. They didn't see Bowers merely as a tight end, but rather someone who could single-handedly diversify the Raiders' attack by lining up at different spots. So far, they've lived up to their word, as Bowers has not only frequently played alongside Mayer in 12 personnel, when one running back and 2 tight ends are on the field, but also sometimes as a slot receiver and a fullback. That doesn't sound like a tight end to me. That sounds like an offensive weapon that is going to be on the field a lot and used a ton. So I think Brock Bowers is going to be this year's Sam Laporta. I don't know if he's going to end up as tight end 1. I think that's asking too much, but I have him ranked at 5. I have him ahead of Kincaid, who is in for a big year with all of those targets gone from Stephon Diggs, because I think he's that talented. So I'm going to stick here, be a broken record, and keep preaching my Brock Bowers love.
Well, look at that. We're starting off hot with quarterbacks and tight ends. Ladies and gentlemen, wait till you get to the running backs and wide receivers. It's going to get very beautiful. Before we move on, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at DraftKings. Everything is going on in the sports world. We've got NFL preseason action. We've got baseball that's going on, the Olympics. There is so much to be had, and DraftKings, they are your go-to. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, place your first bet, and really it couldn't be any easier or simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC, there's something for every sports fan to bet on at DraftKings. And we know it's early, but the NFL regular season, not just in preseason, but futures, baby. Get it going today. What I want you to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, where the crown is yours. Joe has a beautiful crown too. That
I do. I have it right over here. It wasn't given to me by DraftKings, but I can wear it in honor of DraftKings. If
it looks like it shouldn't fit your head. It looks so much bigger. Are there like little pointy things inside of there? Let me see the inside of that real quick.
No, I don't. No, I'm not going to show you the inside of my crown. No,
okay.
This is a family program.
Yeah. Very personal. Yeah. Don't talk politics, how much people make, or look inside
of my crown.
Yeah. Very, very sorry. All right. Well, let's look inside of your must-haves. Joe Pisapia, number 2 on the must-have players. Who do you got?
Real quick, too. I love Bowers. Just want to say that. If the tight end pool gets away from me, no tight ends made my list of must-haves only because I feel like the value is so good. Like the guys at the top, if you get them at a little bit of a discount, Kelsey, Laporta, awesome. Otherwise, that pivot to the Kincaid, Kyle Pitts tier of guys, I'm good with that. I'll settle for Evan Ingram. Like, I got no problem with that. I still think he's going to be a huge target getter. And then Bowers is a great one late. So none of my players must-have are tight ends for that reason, because I love the tight end position this year. I think there's a lot of value. It's appropriately priced, and I think that you can really have a lot of different strategies and allow the board to come to you there. But Terry McLaurin for me is my number 5 guy. And I did just draft him as well in the big Flex League, Expert League draft. 4 straight years of 1,000 yards receiving. It's really as simple as that. And now you're giving him by far the best quarterback he's ever worked with. And I'm a broken record when it comes to TMC, just the way Boggs is when it comes to Bowers. Here's a list of the names of the quarterbacks he's played with: Case Keenum, Dwayne Haskins, Colt McCoy, Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Garrett Gilbert, Carson Wentz, and then Sam Howell. And now Jayden Daniels. And the floor has already been set for him. And if you keep giving me guys like Terry McLaurin, where he is being drafted as wide receiver 32, that's absurd. He is clearly at minimum a wide receiver 2. You're already giving him to me as a wide receiver 3. And he has the upside to finish as a high end 2, even maybe a low end 1, depending on if Jayden Daniels really has a fantastic start to the year. So to me, Terry McLaurin is absolutely somebody that if you go running back early the way you guys like to, you can make up ground at wide receiver. Or if you're just doing big wide receiver builds, Terry McLaurin is another guy you could probably get as that 4th guy if you're going for the first 3 rounds and then snag him in the 4th round potentially. It's an amazing situation this year, the value and return on investment for McLaurin. Why he's so low, I don't understand. I guess it's the uncertainty of the rookie quarterback, but I don't have a lot of questions about the talent of Jayden Daniels, even if it takes a little while. Again, another 1,000-yard season, I think, is just the beginning for him.
You see how snarky that was, Bogman? He's like, yeah, you like to take those running
backs. You guys
backs,
live in the past like running backs.
Yeah,
snarky. You took it that way.
Hey,
yeah.
Look, when there's guys like Terry McLaurin, it affords the Welsh and I to be able to take running backs.
Occasionally, yeah.
I wrote 5 players down, and this is the nice thing about getting to the sheet first, right? Is I wrote my 5 down, and I went to the sheet, and Joe had already done it, and he had 3 of my players, and Terry McLaurin was the first one. And I am a huge Terry McLaurin fan, and I just think in this offense, he is going to be huge. He's going 31. I have him in the mid-20s. I just don't get it. I'd be fine with him as my wide receiver 2 if I have to, if I'm reaching.
And like you said, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to be a crazy advocate for like you going nuts with running back. We just did a mock draft where I went nuts. And throughout the draft, I'm like, I hate this. I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. FantasyPros is going to fire me. I've taken too many running backs. That's not allowed. All of that type of stuff. And then I got graded out amazing. But yeah, it was really good. But also part of the concept of that and why we can dive into that are players like Terry McLaurin. Like you said, Boggs, like there are some of those players in that like mid 25 to 35 range that have those like wide receiver 1 to 2 upsides. And Terry McLaurin has that. Boggs, interestingly enough, your number 2 must-have player is on the same team. So let's hear it. But it's not a wide receiver. It's one of those dastardly running backs.
One of those dumb running backs that we shouldn't be taking. It's Brian Robinson. And I think when you think of running backs in Cliff Kingsbury, you probably go, what? Well, why are we taking Brian Robinson, right? Well, let's remember James Conner's seasons as the RB1 for Cliff Kingsbury in 22. He was 10th in points per game and 6th in 21 in points per game. And that's half PPR. And look, James Conner misses games. We know that. And I know that maybe we think that Austin Eckler is going to get a lot of catches, but Brian Robinson is better between the tackles. He's going to get the goal line work, and he should get more targets than you expect, because in terms of yards per route run among running backs last season, he was 4th. The only guys better than him in yards per route run were Tyler Algier, Breece Hall, and Alvin Kamara. That's it. Brian Robinson is a 3-down back, whether Austin Eckler is on this team or not. So I think Austin Eckler might be used more as change of pace. I don't think that 3rd down role is exclusively his at all, especially with how slow he looked last season. And I think Brian Robinson is going to have way more touches at the end of the season than Austin Eckler. And I think we're kind of sleeping on it. So I love Brian Robinson late as my RB3.
2 commanders on must-have list as well.
Kingsbury.
You know what, Boggs? To your point, that's another guy. Again, he's on that roster. You and I would have loved that, drafting together this weekend. We have all these guys in the same pot. But, to Bogman's point, too, about Robinson, a very solid running back at Bama that I think just never got the hype he deserved because, the offense was just so prolific that sometimes you take for granted the guy that's just steady Eddie and getting it done. And I feel like he's starting to emerge on that level in the NFL, too. I'm with Boggs. Brian Robinson is a really good value, and I took him from Debro in that draft, which made him even sweeter. Like 4 picks before him, he was salty.
Oh, man.
Box Debro.
Box that up and sell it at the store. I'm buying all the shares that I can. That is a beautiful. By the way, it really is a testament to. There's questions about some of these rookie running backs. They come at decent cost. Jayden Daniels can sometimes go at like 11 or 12, but we're sitting here and we're talking about like, hey, Jayden Daniels finally a good quarterback for Terry McLaurin. Jayden Daniels and what he's going to do on the offense. probably going to make them more efficient, spread the ball around a little bit more, kind of maybe looking at Jayden Daniels like what Lamar can do for the Baltimore Ravens and where Derrick Henry is going to go. Both of those running backs can survive. Like I'm kind of an Eckler guy because I think Eckler is going to be the number one safety net for Jayden Daniels. And I think he'll be out there a decent amount, but he's not going to be clearly we would love Brian Robinson to get all of the run, but he's not going to get all of the run. But that might make him just.
Well, any issues with Jayden Daniels, and they're going to be handing that ball off a ton. So Brian Robinson get a lot of work if that's the case.
Joe, we are going to your third of the must-have players, and this is one of my favorite guys last year in the live streams. If you listened early on Sunday mornings, which we'll be doing again this year, Joe Pisapia hosts the first hour. I hosted the second hour, and I brought this guy up every single week. The sneaky Nico Collins is not so sneaky anymore. In fact, he's like a top 15 wide receiver, but there's other wide receivers. So what makes him a must-have when they added Stefon Diggs in here? I'm excited to hear it, Joe.
Well, this is a guy that finished here's a guy that finished as wide receiver 9 last year. And if we're being honest, 109 targets, 80 catches, almost 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. So he's kind of established a floor. And now all of a sudden he's wide receiver 15, 16, depending on whose board you're looking at. And what I'm trying to figure out is this just because Stefon Diggs was acquired? And if that's the reason, to me, that's not a good enough reason to suppress his value. And when I'm looking in that second tier of those 1A wide receivers, he's by far my favorite. I love CJ Stroud. Everybody knows last year I was a big CJ Stroud guy. He even exceeded my expectations. And Nico was not a guy, to Welsh's credit, that I was in on too much last season. And I was absolutely wrong about that. And I wish I had more shares of Nico. He was terrific. I had some late Tank Dell shares, which were fun, but ultimately a little disappointing because, he's a run blocker, apparently, in that offense sometimes. But anyway, looking at Nico Collins, this is why I want to go after those early wide receivers in that first round so much, because I love that group. And then when you get into that next tier, there's uncertainty a little bit for me with some of those guys. Each one of them has something that sort of bothers me. But the only thing that you can really kind of poke at when it comes to Nico is, well, Tank Dell's there too, and now they brought in Stefon Diggs. But at this point in Diggs' career, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think he distracts the defense a little bit, causes you to be honest and guard Nico one-on-one. And I think that's going to be a problem. I think Nico is the guy in this offense. And I think there's just too much hype around the addition of Diggs. I'm not saying Diggs can't be useful, but I'm saying to drag him as to wide receiver 15 when I think he is more of a wide receiver 1 in fantasy, that's a value, and that's a value I'm going to take more often than not.
An interesting thing with Nico, too, when I was looking, it's amazing what he did with the snap percentages. They were actually pretty low snap. Like his snap percentage on a week in, week out basis was lower than like Romeo Doubs of the Packers. And I've held Nico down a tiny bit this preseason because of the added weapons of Stefon Diggs. But then I came to a realization, like how I look at the Bears, I have brought Keenan Allen down and I'm not hurting DJ Moore. I'm not, making him suffer in the ranks. And Odunze is the guy that I think can really break out. So I'm trying not to hurt that Texan situation with Nico Collins when I'm not doing it to the Bears. And Boggs, just as a real quick aside, we were doing sleepers in the bus. I know Tank Dell is a player that you think is kind of a bust right now. So this is even more of a push for a guy like Nico Collins.
Nico Collins was another guy on that list. He was one of the 3 that Joe picked that I was mad about. And it's, I love yards per route run. It's one of my favorite stats. And I think it just encapsulates everything among wide receivers. And Nico Collins was second in the NFL last season, 3.1. Tyreek Hill had an insane 3.82. The only other guy over 3 was Brandon Ayuk. So I think that Nico is the safest of these wide receivers. Tank Dell was very good, but he's very undersized. Injuries could be a thing in his career. Stefon Diggs is the falling knife that we talked about. So I think Nico is easily the safest here.
I love it. And I want to tell you guys about somebody else that I love. Our friends over at Game Time. This past year, that guy a little bit over further to my left, Scott Bogman and I, we went to the World Series. How do we go to the World Series? Via the Game Time app. Just a month ago, we had a great Fantasy Pros meetup where we had like 4 or 5 of the Fantasy Pros people and myself met up here in Arizona. We went to a Diamondbacks game, and what did we use? The Game Time app. That's how we got our tickets, and they were phenomenal. Game Time Also, an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster. Prices on Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to the game with killer last minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seats, and the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, which is incredible. And you can save up to 60% off of buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. They've got flash deals, there's zone deals, and the all-in pricing is one of the greatest things on the planet. There's not going to be any more hidden fees. It is all built into the price you see is what you're going to pay, and they've got the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time is going to credit you with a 100% difference on that price. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for 20% off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code FANTASYPROS. That's FantasyPros for 20% off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Mr. Scott Bogman, we've got number 3 for you on the must-have players as we hit the halfway point. Throw it at us. What do we got?
I'm going with Joe Burrow. He was 4th in 22 in points per game and total, 8th in points per game and 10th in total in 21. And I think we forget how good he was because of the injuries that he has had. And look, if you're out on Burrow because of the injuries, okay, I understand it. But this guy is one of the best QBs in the league right now. He is a potential MVP every single year. And what did we just talk about with Nico Collins, right? We're worried about Nico because you bring in Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell comes back, Joe Mixon. But who does all those additions lift? They all lift CJ Stroud, right? Well, we get T. Higgins back here. Jamar Chase is back. Andre Yosevich is being gushed about in the preseason and everything. And Jermaine Burton is just such a good deep threat. He was really drafted low because of some off-field stuff. So I think that with no running game, or the lack of the running game, with Joe Mixon gone, and now you have between Chase Brown and Zach Moss, I don't know how that run game is going to work. The offensive line is improved too. The defense still isn't great. I think that Cincinnati's going to have to pass the ball a bunch. This is a vertical pass-first offense. If they can keep Joe Burrow clean, I think it's going to have an enormous year. And we've already seen him put together great years, which is, I love Anthony Richardson. He's got all this rushing upside, but we've seen him play 3.25 games, so he was pretty good there, but we're already talking about him like he's cemented. I still like Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow has a really high floor. Like I said, I get it if you're off because of the injuries. I'm just not. He's really, really good.
I also like the mention of the lack of the running game, like Mixon gone. Like they've got guys, don't get it wrong, like Zach Moss, sure, Chase Brown, but it's not an established running game. I really think they can move off from it, and more Chase Brown might be good from the receiving side. Mr. Joe Pisapia, this next guy has been one of my favorites. I feel like we've talked about him a decent amount in drafts, and I really do like this. I do view this guy, when given the opportunity to be a must-have player, this wide receiver is definitely on that list for me.
Yeah, and look, Jaylen Waddle, I won't stay too long at the dance at, because I think we've all heard me talk about Jaylen Waddle since I think the beginning of the season when some of the ranks came out. I was just shocked at where he was. Now he's moved up a little bit. He's up to wide receiver 17 right now. I think it's still too low. Andrew Erickson's gone completely even past me, which is unbelievable. And he did draft him this weekend in the draft. And I'm where he is. This is a player that came in the league and saw 140 targets and had 100 catches in his first season as a rookie. Then in his second season, all he did was finish as wide receiver 7 with 1,356 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's an incredible offense. It runs fast. It runs hot. It runs efficient. It's fantastic. And last year, the only problem was injuries. He missed time and he wasn't healthy. And that happens. Some years happen. Now, I think it's too early to be calling him injury prone or any of that stuff. I think you crumple up this season, you throw it out the window. And if he has more injuries this year, then we can sit and come back to the table next year and talk about, well, maybe Jaylen Waddle is a player we have to be a little bit more concerned with. But I can't get there after one season. I mean, this is his 4th year in the league. He is one of the most, I think, special talents out there. He always came in with the pedigree, had a great college career too. And I think that you look at the 81 receptions and 1,100 yards that basically he's earmarked for in projections. I think they're way off. I think it's way past that, both of those numbers. So For me, when it comes to Jaylen Waddle, there's another guy being grossly underdrafted, and I want to take him. You want to take guys like Terry McLaurin, draft him as a 3, ends up as a 2. You can draft Jaylen Waddle as a 2, he can end up as a 1. I think that's a very special type of value that's on the board when it comes to Waddle. And I believe in this Miami offense. We've seen it enough, and we've seen how good it can be for fantasy. So I just don't get why Jaylen Waddle at the end of the day is so undervalued. So I'm going to take him in as many drafts as I can, as long as the board continues to undervalue him.
Another point I just want to point out why, hey, let me start off with Bijan Robinson and then go to Kyron Williams in the second round and then give me Jaylen Waddle and then give me Terry McLaurin. Jaylen Waddle and Terry McLaurin are two definite target wide receivers that have the upside to make up for what you might have lost by not taking the top tier running backs, but those top tier running backs are just so much better than the others. But, I don't want to lose my job here, getting all crazy. Mr. Scott Bogman, this next player is one of my absolute favorites. I took him in a rookie draft that we were just doing. We also went in and dug in because you can see the individual rankers here on Fantasy Pros. And we found out from all the rankers, Bogman is the 4th highest, I believe, on this player of anybody, at least as of now. Things are going to change. This wide receiver has no other good players, doesn't even have a good quarterback, but that's part of the reason why he's going to be so special. And he is the talk of camps. Let's talk about Malik Nabers.
Yeah, we've talked about Malik Nabers, maybe too much, right? But 89 catches, 1,569 yards, and 14 touchdowns last season. He definitely helped lift Jaden Daniels to that Heisman Trophy, him and Brian Thomas at LSU. And you look at Daniel Jones, and I understand that people are not in. I get it. Like, Daniel Jones does not look good. He's coming off an injury. Even in camp, he's made some overthrows, but there's been better reports recently that he has been turning it on, and those overthrows and underthrows are becoming less consistent. The dude has been injured for a while, so he's getting his rhythm back in. And look, the bottom line here is there's no one else really to catch the ball in New York. It's Malik Nabers, and then do the Billy Bean, rest in peace, from Moneyball, by the way, right? Like 50 feet of what?
Wrong Billy Bean. Then they're two different Billy Beans. Of course,
how could you not? Then everybody else.
Well, no, it's
and then everybody else, and it's just Malik Nabers is so much better than any other weapon they have. They got rid of Saquon. They're going to Devin Singletary. He, we saw Puka Nacua give 154 targets last year. I think we're going to be in the same range for Malik Nabers. I think we're going to see him run short a bunch, a lot of short passes thrown at him, maybe some reverses. They're going to find different ways to get his hands on the football. So I just think he's in for a massive workload this season as a rookie, and he is amazing with the ball in his hands. So I'm just super excited to see it. He's going way later than, the other rookie here. I think he's a better value. So I'm all in on Malik Nabers. Me and Jerry Jones.
I think we were talking, but I think it was the wrong Billy Bean that was reported. Isn't that correct?
Yes, the wrong. Well, yeah. Billy Bean did pass away.
Is that right?
All Billy Bean. It's the different Billy Bean.
Yeah, Billy Beans. All right, so let's
I'll Google it.
Okay, well
dude, I was doing the quote from the movie Moneyball. Was that not Billy Bean?
You just said R.I.P. That's the Billy Bean who's the GM of the Oakland A's, what Moneyball is about. Then there was Billy Bean, the other baseball player,
wrong Billy Bean,
who was the gay rights advocate.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes,
it's very similar to Joe Arrico on the football side and
Joe
Arrico on the baseball side.
Ricos. Yeah, there's a baseball version and NFL version. It's like some kind of weird Marvel universe.
They have their own little group, by the way. I don't have a group, by the way, with Reds broadcaster Chris Welsh. He is way too old. I don't know if he even knows text chain groups. But if we did, he does follow me,
Probably don't agree with everything he said either.
We also don't agree with all the same things. You are 100% right about that. All right, it's running back time, baby. We've got 2 must-have running backs. Can you believe it? Joe Pisapia, you murdered Bogman on this one because you got to it first, not letting him have this. We all like it, but you two are definitely the spokesman for Mr. Derrick Henry.
Yes, well, I mean, maybe it's time for the crown again when we're talking about the king.
King
Perhaps
Henry.
it is. Look, I know on a couple shows ago on the Hero vs. Zero RB show, if you missed that, go back and watch it because it's spectacular. But we had a conversation, and Andrew Erickson and I got into it because of the Derrick Henry thing, and he was a little less on Derrick Henry, and I just kept fighting for Derrick Henry, and the reason is I don't care if it's a PPR league. Yards are yards, okay? 2 years ago, this guy had 1,500 yards. He has finished as an RB1 4 of the last 5 seasons. The 1 year he didn't, he still finished as RB16, and they only played 8 games. Okay. So just let's not forget how great he is. And there are outliers. Yes, when running backs get to 29, 30 years old, you should normally cut bait. But then there are the outliers. They're the guys who are just special. And Derrick Henry is one of those special guys. As Derek Brown likes to say, he's built different. And he just is. And now you're dropping him in a situation where he's going from a team that struggled to move the chains, struggled to get any kind of good offense in the last couple of years, really going, to a team that runs the football more than anybody else, better than anybody else practically. And I just don't understand how he's not a huge value currently. And this is why I don't go running back in the first rounds, because Derrick Henry is always there for me in the second or towards the end of the second, sometimes even the third round, which is unbelievable. In our latest mock draft, you can go back and watch it. I got him in the third round. It was fantastic. Super excited about that. I played the game and he was still there. RB7 for a guy who's going to lead the league in rushing and probably have double-digit touchdowns again. I don't care if he's not catching footballs. I don't care. Yards are yards. Touchdowns are touchdowns. And at the end of the day, he's going to have both of those in that offense. So Boggs, I don't know all the reasons why you love Derrick Henry. I know why some of the reasons, people are scared of him. But what's your 2 cents on the King?
I mean, you just said it. He is the biggest freak of nature in the NFL. I mean, Adrian Peterson was like this as well, right? Where it was he could get hurt, he could come back, and it was at the very end of his career where he really slowed down. I think the same thing, we're seeing the same thing from Derrick Henry. It's so many carries. He keeps putting them up as well. And last season, the tush push, right? That was the most unstoppable play in the NFL, Kelsey and Hurts. How about the RPO between Lamar and Derrick Henry? How is a linebacker going to choose which to go after? You either get run over by Derrick Henry or you can't catch Lamar. It's now the most dangerous play in the NFL, I think. So I think Derrick Henry is going to stack it up, and he's finally behind a good QB. Who's the best QB he played with in Tennessee? Ryan Tannehill? So I'm just really excited to see what Derrick Henry can do in Baltimore. Hopefully not against Pittsburgh.
If the Ravens, by the way, don't treat their offense like a 13-year-old playing Madden, and they just run the same, power right, power or RPO left, RPO.
Yeah, they should just say that. My 12-year-old daughter plays Madden, and she never runs the football. I'm always yelling at her.
She's a quarterback. Of course she does.
I know she's a quarterback, but all she wants to do is throw something. You got to balance some things out once in a while.
Great quarterbacks are not going to do that, Joe. She's a great quarterback. Lamar, I'm not saying I shouldn't say Lamar Jackson's not. I'm not saying he's not a great quarterback, but they should just run that play every other time.
Right,
Bogman, this running back is literally your guy. You are. I should go look, and I shouldn't say literally because I don't know if the rank dictates that. But you have been so outspoken. You are so outspoken, and your head tilts back in a complete sense of frustration when you do not get him. This player is Ken Walker with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about some PFF grades, right? 7th in offensive grade, 8th in run grade, 5th in missed tackles forced, 10th in runs of 10 plus, 8th in elusive rating, top 20 in yards per route run, and he's going right now as running back 16. He's top 10 in all these categories, and he's RB 16. And Grubb said that he's building the offense around Geno Smith's strengths. So they should probably run a lot if that's the case. I think we see these 3 wide receivers on this team and we go, man, you have DK, you have Lockett, you have JSN. This team is going to pass a bunch. We just saw Grubb come in from Washington where they threw the ball with Michael Penix 1 million times. Geno Smith ain't Michael Penix. He's just not. They like Sam Howell too. Sam Howell showed he's not ready. You have Charbonnet, you have Walker. This team should be running the ball so much. That defense isn't 100% fixed. It's going to be much better this year, but I think run the ball and play defense should be the name of the game of the Seattle Seahawks. And I think Ken Walker is going to have a massive year. And all I'm asking you to do, because when you look at ECR on the website, just move Walker to the top of that group that he's in. That's what I do. I move him to the top of that group. You don't have to. You can take him as your RB2 and just be great when he puts up RB1 numbers.
All right. Well, before we get to the last two must-have players, one from Joe, one from Bogman. Both wide receivers, must-have wide receivers. we want to tell you guys about the cheat sheet. Tired of draft day uncertainty? Well, the cheat sheet creator, it's your personal guide to perfect league-specific rankings, which is phenomenal. Visualize your path to victory as you add tiers, and you can sync your league to craft custom rankings, ensuring every pick is strategic and tailored to your league settings. That one right there, very critical. Enter your draft with confidence by syncing your league today at fantasypros.com/draftwizard or on the Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app. And then you can use the cheat sheet creator to dominate your draft as well. You can set up special cheat sheets to rankers. You can set Bogman and Joe. Don't put stupid me, put a couple of those people on there and get 4, 5, 2, 3, whatever you want. Or maybe you could have a heavy running back cheat sheet with Bogman and I. You can go check it out today. Do it on the Draft Wizard. Gentlemen, last one up here. Joe Pisapia, your wide receiver that you must have is not going to be very cheap.
No, he's not, but I still think this is the floor, and everybody already knows it, and that's why they're drafting Marvin Harrison where he is right now. So he's pretty much around, wide receiver 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range, depending on your draft. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm still in. Another player that made it to my team, as did number one on Bogman's list too. Boggs, after this is over, I got to run you this roster because pretty much this roster, and this is why we talk about must-haves, right? There's some analysts and a lot of people in the fantasy football community who talk a lot of game, but then don't get out there and actually do it and put it into practice. I believe in Marvin Harrison Jr. I believe in the talent. I believe in the situation. It's very clear he's the alpha. The competition for targets is Trey McBride and a bunch of Jags. So if you're also looking and saying, well, how good could he be and all this stuff, let me just remind you, okay, that 3 of the top 4 rookie wide receiver seasons in terms of yardage totals have happened in the last 5 years. It's Jefferson, it's Chase, and it's Puka Nacua, with 3 of the 4. Now, for fun, if you want to name the other one, that's a fun one. I don't think you'll get it. It was in 1960. It was Bill Gorman. That's who it was. But that is
old Bill Gorman. How could we forget Bill Gorman?
That reminds me. I got to give him a call. But seriously, think about what the league has become. It's a wide receiver league. Why can't a guy that has the pedigree of Marvin Harrison, the talent, the opportunity, a quarterback who just a couple years ago with DeAndre Hopkins supported a 1,400-yard receiving season, why can't he come out of the gates with a 1,400 and 10 to 12 touchdowns? I can't think of a reason why, and that defense stinks still. They're going to be having to throw the ball all of the time. They are never going to have leads in Arizona. It's just not going to happen. So I'm very confident in Marvin Harrison. I'm very confident drafting him. In fact, I am more confident in some ways, and I proved it this weekend, over Garrett Wilson or even Puka Nacua. I think that conversation is one that needs to be had more often.
Well, we're going from one of the most exciting rookies and molds of clay, what could be, to one of the most boring wide receivers who's undervalued. But boy, I don't disagree that you do need to have him, Bogman. Your number one on the must-haves is who?
Yeah, nobody has an argument against Michael Pittman. The floor is incredible. The last 3 seasons, 88, 99, 108 catches. As for yards, it goes 1082, 925, 1152. The problem has been the touchdowns. And look, you can't make them throw Michael Pittman the football, but I can tell you this, that last season there were 32 players with 20-plus contested targets. And Michael Pittman had the 9th most targets and the 4th most contested catches. He had a receiving percentage of 53.6% on those contested catches. Only Chris Godwin and Cortland Sutton had a better percentage. DJ Moore had tied him, but the third highest completion percentage when targeted in contested situations. So don't tell me he can't go up and get the football at the goal line. He can. He's proven that he can. He can beat man. He can beat zone. It doesn't matter. He's got an enormous floor, and there's so much room to grow in the touchdown department. He only has 15 over his 4 seasons. He could score 10 this year. Would not shock me. These are fickle, right? But yeah, JT missed some time last year. You had Anthony Richardson, break his stuff last season. So maybe you don't want those guys running at the goal line. Maybe you want to keep them, upright, especially when you have these massive tight ends that they have and a guy like Michael Pittman, who is a great contested catch guy. So I think this is the year that he breaks out, and the floor is enormous with the targets and the catches and the yards already. All he has to do is add touchdowns, and I think he does it this year.
Yeah, I'm with Boggs 100% on Pittman. And just to run through this, Boggs, you'll enjoy this. Super Flex League, again, this is the Flex League that our friend Jake Seeley runs. You guys are in the other ones as well. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. Boom, check him off the list. And I love Lamar. So basically, I have taken all of the scoring of the Baltimore Ravens and I have it on my team. All the scoring runs through those two guys on that team in some way, shape, or form, except for the defense when they score. And Sealy got rid of defense, so he can't play with defense anymore. Rashad White.
No.
Then here we go. Marvin Harrison, Michael Pittman, Terry McLaurin. Those are the three wideouts I've got in this Superflex league. Pat Freiermuth is the tight end, your boy from Pittsburgh. And then on the bench, we've got Justin Fields, Rico Dowdle, Brian Robinson Jr., and then a few other guys. So again, we practice what we preach. These are our guys. And this is a squad that reflects not just mine, but also Bogman's must-haves. And this is, I think, a great way to go and see, it's pretty easy to go out and construct a roster in Superflex or one QB that has a lot of the players we're talking about today.
Living your best truth. To run through these, Joe's must-haves: Jordan Love, Terry McLaurin, Nico Collins, Jaylen Waddle, Derrick Henry, and Marvin Harrison Jr., Bogman, Brock Bowers, Brian Robinson, Joe Burrow, Malik Nabers, Ken Walker, and Michael Pittman. And friends, I'll leave you with this. If you can't recognize the sucker at the table, you might be the sucker. And we're not going to leave you to not knowing the analogy or being the sucker. These 12 must-have players, they're going to help you out, and you'll be able to see who it is. I think I was thinking donkey originally, by the way. It's a term that they use, but I got the term.
There's a lot of barnyard animals in the
You
first
always start
rendition.
so far off. You're like, what if the pig with the wind and the fence? What if that happens? So
guess what? Yeah. We got there. That's all that matters. You can find Joe Pisapia on Twitter at Joe Pisapia17, Bogman at Bogman Sports. You can find me at Is It the Welsh, and you can find all the great content here at Fantasy Pros on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasypros. I assume you're already here, but if you're listening on the podcast, there you go. And the Inverse, your favorite podcast app, that is where you can download all of the Fantasy Pros shows. We've got tons and tons of great content, and we've got the best tools in the industry. So go to fantasypros.com, download the Draft Wizard app. You can start syncing, drafting, analyzing, and getting all your ranks and mocks on. Don't wait. Do it now. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, friends, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros, the football podcast.